The War Council froze as Amelia Williams held up a crinkly, golden rectangle, and the 4 predator cubs abandoned their sacred patrol formation to launch themselves at her in a coordinated ambush that would have terrified any reasonable civilization. "No, absolutely not," Amelia said, pivoting with the reflexes of a woman who'd spent 3 months learning predator cub combat patterns while working as a ship's mechanic. "This is mine. I bought this with my own credits at the Earth Goods Station, and you 4 menaces get your own dinner." The largest cub, Kyrax, midnight black with eyes like burning amber, skidded to a halt, his claws sparking against the reinforced deck plating. His snout wrinkled, his ears flattened, his pupils dilated to 3 times their normal size. Then he growled. Not a warning growl, not a dominance growl. A want growl, a need growl, the kind of sound that made the reinforced viewport behind them shudder sympathetically. Across the observation deck, Vex Thule, the Korvax expedition commander, a being of crystalline intelligence and cold diplomatic precision, stiffened, his 3 sensory stalks twisted toward the commotion. "Explain, now, what is occurring?" "Nothing," Amelia said brightly, crunching into the golden rectangle. It was a Cheeto specifically, a contraband shipment from Earth that had arrived in the last supply pod. The sound was crispy. The sound was glorious. The sound was also, apparently, a cosmic declaration of war. 4 sets of predator ears pinned backward. 4 sets of predator eyes locked onto the snack. 4 predator cubs who had once stood between armies and a moon's worth of plasma fire sat perfectly still. Not because they were obedient, because they were locked in predatory focus, calculating angles, breath synchronized, waiting for the exact moment when— "Do not," Amelia warned, pointing the Cheeto at them like it was a miniature plasma rifle. "I see you, Kyrax. I see you, Talrix. I see you, Myra. And yes, Sin, I see you too, baby. This is Earth food. This is human food. You have your protein synthesis meal. You have your mineral paste. You have 17 other things in the galley." "Impressive," Vexthul murmured to his aide. Jataro, a younger Korvax whose sensory stalks were vibrating with barely contained fascination. "The human has named the cubs in violation of the predator species recognition protocols. They should have contested the claim. They should have established their own nomenclature through ritual challenge. Instead," Jataro whispered, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light as he leaned forward, "they sit, and they listen to her." "She possesses a commanding tone," Vexthul conceded coldly. "Immaterial. The cubs will—" Kyrax's tail twitched. Amelia's eyes widened. "Don't you dare!" The ambush was surgical. Kyrax went low. Talrix came from the upper left vector. Myra fainted high while Sin, clever, vicious, perfect little Sin, came in from behind, using Amelia's own startled pivot against her. 400 kilos of apex predator, coordinated with precision that made the Korvax war strategists wince, converged on one human woman and one golden rectangle. Amelia did what she'd been doing for 3 months in the face of impossible odds. She improvised. She threw the Cheeto. It skittered across the observation deck in a perfect arc, bouncing once, twice, scattering crumbs like edible breadcrumbs marking a trail of pure chaos. The cubs exploded after it, their growls harmonizing into something that sounded suspiciously like laughter, a sound that made Vexthul's sensory stalks collapse inward in shock. "They play," Jataro breathed. "The sacred predators. They play with the human like cubs with a mother," Vexthul finished, his voice thin as crystalline ice cracking under pressure. "This is not acceptable. This violates 17 fundamental protocols regarding Korvax predator species interaction frameworks. The human must be removed. The cubs must be reoriented. This attachment must be severed." But Amelia had already moved. She scooped up Myra as the little female skidded past her, spinning the cub and setting her down gently. She caught Sin mid-leap and lifted him to the viewport, letting him see his reflection in the star field beyond. something that made the cub chirp with confusion and wonder. "That's you, sweetie," Amelia cooed, like she was talking to a golden retriever instead of an apex predator that could disembowel a Korvax warrior in approximately 1.3 seconds. "That's my beautiful Sin out there in the stars. Isn't that amazing?" Sin pressed his forehead against the viewport. Then he turned, pressed his forehead against Amelia's forehead, and chittered. A sound so soft, so tender, that even Vex Thul went completely silent. "Sir," Jotaro whispered, "should we report this?" "Report what?" Vex Thul's voice was carefully neutral. "We witnessed nothing. There was no violation. The human simply feeds the predators earth snacks while teaching them xenoastronomy." "But the protocols?" "The protocols are about to become very flexible, Jotaro. I suggest we observe more carefully before anyone says anything to the War Council. Because if word reaches the elders that 4 sacred predators, warriors that have stood against the Corvan Armada, that have earned ceremonial scars in the Temple of War, are currently engaged in tender forehead pressing with a human woman over earth snacks." He let the sentence hang. Jotaro understood. The entire Korvax understanding of cosmic order was about to develop a very significant crack. By the next morning, the rumor had spread through the ship like a solar flare. The human woman had brought snacks to the sacred predators. Not prepared food, not synthetic nutrition, but snacks. Contraband earth goods that tasted like explosions of salt and oil and impossible seasoning combinations that had no place in civilized civilization. The problem wasn't the snacks. The problem was that the cubs refused to do anything else. "Kirax," the War Master's voice boomed through the training chamber, a vast arena where predator cubs were meant to be honed into perfect instruments of war. "You will resume your formation. You will practice the 17 sacred strikes. You will—" Kirax turned to look at him. Slowly. Then he sat down, and he wailed. It was the most pathetic, miserable, absolutely heartbreaking sound anyone in the chamber had ever heard from a creature of pure predatory instinct. The War Master staggered backward. His subordinates exchanged glances of utter confusion. "Sir," one ventured carefully, "is the predator crying for a snack?" "It cannot be," the War Master said, but his voice wavered. Because yes, Kirax was absolutely, unquestionably sitting in the center of the sacred training arena and wailing like his world had ended because a human woman had left the ship for cargo bay maintenance and had forgotten to leave Cheetos. Talarix joined him, then Myra, then Sin. 4 sacred predators, warriors trained since birth to kill without hesitation, sat in the center of the war chamber and cried. For snacks. For her. In the command center, Vex Thul received the report with the kind of horror usually reserved for first contact with hostile species. "They have ceased combat training," Jotaro reported, his sensory stalks rigid with distress. "They will not eat. They will not train. They simply sit and produce these vocalizations." And the human. Vex Thul leaned back in his command chair, his crystalline form catching the holographic light. "She is currently in Cargo Bay 7. She appears unaware of the crisis she has caused." "Of course she is," Vex Thul murmured. "Where is she now?" "Repacking the Earth supplies. Apparently she is rationing the snacks. She has implemented a daily distribution schedule and is explaining the concept of extended joy to the cubs via the internal comm system." Vex Thul's sensory stalks twitched. That was a gesture humans had learned to associate with being internally screaming. "Put her on screen," he commanded. The view screen flickered to life, revealing Amelia Williams in all her glory, sitting cross-legged on the cargo bay floor, surrounded by Cheetos bags, teaching 4 predator cubs the fundamentals of portion control, while humming what Jotaro eventually identified as an ancient Earth song called "It's a Small World." "She is singing," Vex Thul said flatly. "She is singing a children's song to apex predators while rationing contraband snacks. This is not a strategy. This is not a protocol. This is not even a reasonable response to the situation. Sir, Jotaro ventured, perhaps we should simply provide her with adequate snacks. The cubs appear content when consuming the items. Provide her with... Jotaro, do you understand what you're suggesting? We would be officially acknowledging that the War Council's protocols for predator management are now subject to a human woman's decisions regarding Earth snack distribution. We would be creating a precedent. We would be admitting that feelings override training. Jotaro was quiet for a moment. Then, Sir, with respect, the cubs appear to be making excellent decisions regarding the feelings. Perhaps the War Council could benefit from more of them. Vexthul stared at his aide for a long moment. Then he looked back at the screen. Kirax was resting his massive head on Amelia's lap. Talarix was contentedly crunching on a Cheeto. Myra and Sin had curled up against her sides, their breathing synchronized, their eyes slowly closing. She was stroking Kirax's mane with one hand while gently redirecting Sin away from eating the bag itself. Log this, Vexthul said quietly, as an official incident report. The human female has completed Phase 2 of the unexpected attachment cycle. Cubs are now emotionally dependent on her presence and the Earth snacks she provides. Recommend monitoring further developments. Sir, Jotaro asked carefully, what happened to your previous recommendation regarding removal and reorientation? It has been superseded by reality, Jotaro. Sometimes the universe reorganizes itself, and we must simply document the new structure. Request permission to observe the human's next interaction? Request granted, Jotaro said, trying very hard not to sound like he was smiling, which was difficult for a crystalline being who couldn't actually smile. The War Council convened an emergency session. This is unacceptable, the Elder Korvax declared, his ancient form towering over the holographic war table. For 7 generations, the sacred predators have been shaped by tradition, by ritual, by law. They are not meant to feel attachment. They are weapons, perfect, pure, unstained by sentiment. And yet, another council member, Rylia, the Minister of Species Relations, said carefully, they have never been more stable. Silence. Explain, Korvax demanded. The behavioral logs show unprecedented cooperation, Rylia continued, pulling up data streams that made the holographic display glow. The cubs are no longer engaging in territorial disputes. Their combat coordination has increased 17%. Their healing time after training has decreased significantly. They are thriving. Because they are emotionally compromised, another counselor roared. They have bonded with a human of low status, a mechanic, and lost sight of their purpose. Have they? Amelia's voice came through the chamber's communications system. Apparently, she'd been listening the entire time. Because from where I'm sitting, they're doing better than they were before. They're sleeping better, they're eating better, they're not getting into fights over territory. And yes, they love snacks, but they also love me, and somehow that love is making them stronger, not weaker. The council froze. Korvax leaned forward, his predator instincts making the temperature in the room drop several degrees. You presume to counsel the War Council? I presume nothing, Amelia said, her voice steady as starlight. I'm simply stating facts. You have these 4 cubs bred and trained their entire lives to believe that feelings are weakness, that attachment is failure, that the only acceptable response to anything is violence or dominance. And you wonder why they have anxiety disorders, why they have aggression spikes, why they can't maintain stable social hierarchies without someone getting injured. Our ways, Korvax began. Your ways, Amelia interrupted, and there was something in her tone that made even the ancient predator pause. Are designed for war, but they're not at war. They're cubs. They're young. And what they needed, what every young being needs, is to know they're safe, that they're loved, that they matter to someone regardless of their performance metrics or their combat effectiveness. Jotaro's sensory stalks vibrated with what Vexthul recognized as suppressed emotion. The younger Korvax was watching a human woman fundamentally redefine their understanding of warrior culture, and he was apparently experiencing what humans called being moved. The human speaks truth that threatens our foundations, another counselor said quietly. Lear Anna, the Minister of Philosophy. If we acknowledge that love strengthens rather than weakens, then everything we have built must be reconsidered. Exactly, Amelia said. And that's terrifying. I get it. Change is scary. But look at what you have. 4 cubs who are stronger, smarter, healthier, and happier than they've ever been. That's not weakness, that's evolution. Korvax was very still. Then, slowly, he rose from his seat. I will see these cubs, he commanded. I will observe this arrangement with my own judgment. They're in the observation deck, Amelia said cheerfully. Fair warning, though. Kirax is currently teaching Sin how to do a backflip. Talrix is absolutely going to try to steal snacks from you, and Myra is probably going to want cuddles. So wear something cuddly. There was a pause. Then Korvax laughed. It was a sound like crystalline structures breaking and reforming into new and unexpected shapes. All around the council chamber, Korvax stared at their ancient war master in absolute shock. This human, he said, understands us better in 3 months than we have understood ourselves in millennia. The attack came 3 days later. Alarms shrieked through the ship as the Drevnak armada emerged from FTL's space. Enemies older than memory, beings of pure predatory hunger with no interest in diplomacy. They'd been tracking the Korvax fleet for weeks, waiting for an opportunity to strike. This was it. The war chamber erupted into controlled chaos as Korvax warriors mobilized, weapons calibrated, protocols engaged. The predator cubs were separated from the crew quarters and placed in secure chambers, standard procedure when combat became inevitable. They were too valuable to risk, too necessary for future campaigns. Except they screamed, not battle cries, desperate, terrified screams of abandonment. Kirax's roars shook the foundations. Talrix was clawing at the reinforced walls. Myra and Sin paced in frantic circles, their eyes searching for something, someone, they couldn't find. The human, Vexthul commanded. Where is Amelia? Engineering section, Jotaro reported, his crystalline form flickering with distress. She's currently attempting to stabilize the power core during the attack sequence. Sir, the Cubs' distress is affecting combat readiness. The entire ship's morale is degrading. They won't fight without her, Vexthul finished. He made a decision that would have horrified the War Council an hour ago. Override the containment protocols. Release the Cubs. The moment the barriers fell, the Cubs moved. They didn't run randomly. They didn't panic. They moved with absolute, unshakable purpose. Down corridors, through ventilation shafts, following some scent or sense that humans had no framework for understanding. They were a force of nature. An arrow shot at a target only they could perceive. They found her in engineering just as the Drevnak's first plasma strike hit the shield generators. Amelia Williams was elbow-deep in quantum processors, her hair tied back, her expression absolute focus as she rerouted power systems that were designed never to be rerouted. Alarms screamed, the entire section lurched, and then 4 predator cubs burst through the emergency doors like bullets fired from the universe's largest gun. She didn't scream, she didn't startle. She simply looked up and smiled. Oh good, you're here. I need you 4 to sit in the corner and not touch that glowing thing because it will electrocute you, and I am already stressed about that. Kirax sat. All of them sat, in the middle of a space battle, with Drevnak fighters tearing through their outer defenses, with power systems failing and shields collapsing. The Cubs sat, because she had asked them to. Incredible, Jotaro breathed, watching from the security feeds. She is the center of their attention, the absolute gravitational center of their universe. Vexthul was very quiet. Then, route all power to the weapons systems and patch me through to the Drevnak command vessel. Now. The Drevnak warlord, Keztar, received the message with something approaching amusement. A Korvax commander requesting negotiation during combat. It was unheard of. It was weakness. He accepted. Vexithal appeared on his view screen, crystalline form, rigid. "Cease fire," he commanded. "Witness." He opened the feed from engineering. Kezitar saw a human woman in the middle of a battle-grade engineering section. He saw 4 apex predators, creatures his own people feared, sitting perfectly still around her. He saw her pat Sin's head, without looking away from her work. He saw Kirax's eyes track her with the kind of focus that made the Drevnak warlord's skin crawl with something that might have been recognition. "What," Keztar demanded, "is the meaning of this?" "Cease fire," Vexthul repeated, "and I will explain what you are witnessing. A discovery that will reshape galactic understanding of what humans represent. A power we did not know existed. A force that remakes our most lethal warriors into something better." There was a pause. Then Keztar laughed. "You are attempting to manipulate me with mysticism, typical Korvax deception. I will destroy your fleet, consume your—" "Kirax," Amelia's voice came through the channel, calm as a human who had absolutely no idea she was addressing a Drevnak warlord over an open military frequency. "Stop whatever you're about to do." Kirax, who had begun to rise to his feet, sat back down. Vexthul smiled. Crystalline beings weren't supposed to smile, but Vexthul was smiling. The human does not even require to be in the same visual field. Her voice alone is enough. What you are seeing, Commander Kezitar, is not military prowess. It is not bioengineering. It is not technology. What you are seeing is something far more threatening to a warrior species: love. Loyalty, the kind of bond that makes even our greatest weapons forget their purpose and choose something else. There was a very long silence. "Cease fire," Keztar finally said, his voice strange. "Stand down all forces. I wish to observe further." 3 weeks later, Amelia Williams stood in the great chamber of the Korvax, the place where treaties were signed and history was made. The War Council surrounded her, every member present. The elder Korvax stood at the center, his form towering, his presence commanding the attention of every consciousness in the room. He raised his sensory stalks, a gesture that rippled through the assembly like wind through crystal. "It is decided," he announced. "The human woman, Amelia Williams, has demonstrated that the foundational principles of warrior culture can be transcended. That attachment does not weaken predators, it evolves them. That a mechanic from a backwater Earth species can teach us truths that have escaped us for millennia." He turned to face her directly. "Amelia Williams, on behalf of the entire Korvax species and our sacred predator allies, we are implementing the human code. All cubs, from this moment forward, will be raised with the understanding that bonds of affection are not weakness but foundation. That loyalty to something greater than oneself, whether that is family, community, or chosen love, is the true measure of a warrior." Around the chamber, the other council members bowed. Then, impossibly, Korvax bowed as well. Kirax, Talrix, Myra, and Sin, who had been resting in a pile of cushions specifically designed for predator cubs, stood and walked to Amelia. They formed a perfect circle around her, their heads bowed, their eyes closed, their breathing synchronized. It was a gesture older than any words. It was the predator equivalent of choosing a leader, of acknowledging her as center, as home, as the alpha not by might, but by heart. "The galaxy will remember this," Lyrana said softly. "That the Korvax learned tenderness from a human woman and 4 cubs. That we remade ourselves, not through strength, but through love." 2 months later. Amelia was in the observation deck, maintaining the weapon systems that had been installed alongside the new recreational areas. The cubs were, as always, nearby. Kirax and Talrix playing a game with holographic light projections, while Myra and Sin attempted to figure out what happened if they pushed every button in the calibration panel. "No, sweetie, that one activates the proximity alarm. Let's stick to the blue ones." She handed Sin a Cheeto from her pocket. They had somehow become standard issue supplies now, with the Korvax requesting them for diplomatic purposes, and watched as he crunched it contentedly. Vexthul entered, his sensory stalks expressing something that humans had learned to recognize as fondness. "The news broadcasts are reporting something interesting," he said. 3 more predator species have implemented the human code. 2 have requested human teachers. The Drevnak have formally apologized for their aggression and requested cultural exchange. "Apparently," he added with something approaching humor, "what is terrifying about humans is not your strength, but your capacity for love. They have not encountered this before. They find it bewildering. Also, compelling." "That's nice," Amelia said, genuinely pleased. "Humans have been pretty good at the love thing for a while. Took us a few thousand years to get decent at sharing it with other species." "Indeed," Vexthul said. "You have changed us, Amelia Williams, in the way only humans seem able to do. Not through conquest, not through superior technology, simply through choosing to see what was best in us and nurturing it." Kirax patted over and rested his massive head against Amelia's leg. She ran her fingers through his mane, and he made a sound that humans would have recognized as a purr. "Come on, cubs," Amelia said, standing and brushing off the Cheeto dust that decorated her clothes in a kind of constellation pattern. "Let's go home. And on the way, we can stop by the galley and see what I can make for dinner. Maybe something special. Maybe I'll teach you how to make chocolate chip cookies." The cub's ears perked up simultaneously. "Wait," Vexthul said. "What are chocolate chip cookies?" "The next evolution of interspecies relations," Amelia said cheerfully as the cubs gathered around her feet, their eyes glowing with predatory anticipation and pure, absolute joy. "Buckle up, Commander. The galaxy is about to learn that humans don't conquer species. We win them over one snack at a time." As she walked toward the exit, the 4 cubs moving in perfect formation around her, not as soldiers, but as children following a mother through the corridors of a ship that had learned, against all odds, to love. Vexthul's sensory stalks vibrated with something he'd never experienced before. Hope. Pure, crystalline, undeniable hope. The galaxy was changing. Not through war, not through treaties, but through one human woman and 4 predator cubs who had demonstrated something the Korvax had spent millennia trying to destroy. That love, after all, was the most powerful force in existence. Amelia Williams, formerly a ship's mechanic from Earth, accidentally became the woman who remade galactic civilization. All she'd meant to do was share her snacks. End.